It was a quiet town, one of those places where everyone knew everyone, and life moved slowly, almost too slowly for a teenager dreaming of something bigger. In this town lived a girl who seemed ordinary to anyone passing by. Her clothes were old and worn, patched in several places, and her shoes had soles so thin that they sometimes let the cold ground bite her feet. People didn't notice her much. She worked small jobs after school, helping in shops, cleaning houses, and running errands just to make enough money to get by. Life was hard, but she never complained. She had something inside her that no one could see at first glance, a quiet, burning dream. Every day as she walked through the streets, she would pass by the large, grand music hall at the center of the town. The hall was beautiful, with tall windows that let sunlight stream in and polished floors that reflected the light like glass. Inside, wealthy students learned to play the piano, their hands moving gracefully over the keys while music floated in the air. She often stood outside, peeking through the glass doors, listening to the notes drifting out. The music made her heart ache, not just with longing but with a strange sense of hope, as if it were calling to her. She had never learned in a real music school. She didn't have fancy instruments or famous teachers. All she had was a small old piano at home, one that barely stayed in tune, and her mother's faded music books. Still, she practiced every day, pouring every ounce of her emotion into the keys. One chilly morning, something changed. She had been carrying a stack of envelopes to deliver, her hands cold, her mind tired when she saw the hall again. Today she felt a courage she didn't know she had before. She had been dreaming quietly for so long that it almost scared her to take action. But she walked up the wide stone steps and pushed open the grand doors. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of polish and old wood. The sunlight spilled across the floors, and students looked up from their practice, some frowning, some curious. All a little taken aback by the sight of her doc, she approached the receptionist at the front desk, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and an air of superiority. "Excuse me," the girl said softly but firmly. May I play the piano for a few minutes?" The receptionist raised an eyebrow, glancing at her worn shoes and tattered coat. She laughed, a short, sharp laugh that made the girl's stomach twist. "Do you even know how to play?" she asked. The girl nodded, her eyes steady. "Yes," she said simply. "I just want to play for 5 minutes." A few students nearby started whispering, snickering. "Look at her," one said. "She probably can't even touch the keys properly." Another added, "Why does she think she belongs here?" They laughed, a little cruel, thinking this would be entertaining. The receptionist smirked. "Fine," she said, clearly expecting to prove a point. 5 minutes. "Then you must leave." The girl nodded again and walked toward the grand piano in the center of the room. It was a beautiful instrument, polished to a shine, with keys that gleamed under the sunlight. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering above the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her touch. The room had gone silent, all eyes on her. Some looked curious, some skeptical, and a few were just bored. Waiting to laugh, she closed her eyes for a second, taking a deep breath. She thought of her mother, of the tiny piano at home, of the hours spent practicing until her fingers ached and her back hurt. She thought of every tear she had cried in silence, every moment she had felt invisible. And then she began to play. At first, the notes were soft, tentative, almost shy, but there was a strange clarity in the way she moved her hands. The students leaned closer, a little surprised. The receptionist frowned, unsure what she was hearing. The music grew stronger, more confident. Every note seemed to carry a story, a memory, a feeling that went beyond skill. She played with emotion so deep that it seemed almost alive, twisting through the air and reaching the hearts of everyone in the room. The students who had laughed moments ago suddenly stopped. Some couldn't believe what they were hearing. Their mouths were slightly open, their eyes widened. The room felt different now, as if it had been holding its breath. The receptionist's smirk faded, replaced with a look of uncertainty. She had expected a failure, a joke, but instead, the girl was captivating every person in that hall with something she couldn't explain. The girl didn't rush. She let the music flow naturally, each hand moving independently yet perfectly in harmony. It was not just notes being played, it was a story being told. She had learned that from her mother, who always said music was more than sound. It was feeling, it was life itself. Every student, every teacher, every staff member in that room felt it, whether they wanted to admit it or not. As she finished the piece, the last note lingered in the air like a sigh. The room remained silent for a long moment, no one moving, no one clapping. Then a single clap came from the back. Slowly, others joined in, growing louder, until the entire room was applauding, some standing, some with tears in their eyes. The receptionist looked away, embarrassed, realizing she had misjudged the girl completely, the old music instructor. A strict man known for his sharp eyes and sharper words stepped forward. He was quiet at first, just listening, then slowly he approached the girl. There was a strange look on his face, something between shock and recognition. He asked, "Who taught you?" The girl told him about her mother, how she had learned at home with the little piano she had inherited, how she had practiced in secret for years. She never mentioned any special connections, only the hours she had spent, the effort she had made, and the love for music that had been passed down. The instructor's hands trembled slightly. He recognized the style, the way she phrased the music, the depth of emotion. He had not heard anything like it in years. It was the style of a legendary pianist who had disappeared long ago, a woman whose music had inspired millions. And now, here it was, alive in this young girl, in this quiet, humble teenager no one had taken seriously. The girl didn't understand the whispers and the glances yet, but she felt a small sense of pride. For the first time, she realized that her talent, her hard work, and her love for music were not invisible. She had shown them all that she deserved to be heard. She had done something that could not be ignored, something that could not be laughed at. As she left the hall that day, she felt different. The wind on her face seemed sharper, the streets brighter, and the future a little less uncertain. She didn't know what was waiting for her next, but she knew one thing: she had a voice, and it would be heard. And somewhere, in the back of her mind, a tiny spark of curiosity and hope began to grow. Perhaps this was just the beginning. Perhaps her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined, and so, the girl who had been mocked for a simple request had taken the first step toward something extraordinary. She didn't yet know the full story, the family connections, or the mysteries of her mother's past. But she knew one thing: her music was powerful. Her heart was strong, and the world had no choice but to notice her now. The day after her first performance, the girl woke up with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the music hall. For years, she had been invisible, unnoticed, mocked even. And now, for the first time, people had actually listened. The thought made her heart beat faster, but it also made her anxious. She didn't know what would come next. Her day started like any other. She delivered letters, ran errands, and helped at the small bakery in town. But even as she went about her chores, people whispered as she passed. Some stared at her, their eyes full of surprise, some full of curiosity, and some full of respect she had never known before. She could hear fragments of conversation. "Did you hear her play?" "I can't believe it." "She's amazing." At first, she tried to ignore it, pretending it didn't matter. But deep down, she felt a small sense of pride growing in her chest. By the afternoon, word had spread through the town, and even the students at the music hall could not stop talking about her. Teachers and instructors were curious, and even some of the wealthier families were whispering about the mysterious girl who had captured everyone's attention with just a few minutes at the piano. When she returned to the music hall later that day, she felt a mix of fear and determination. She wasn't sure if they would let her play again or if the receptionist would try to turn her away this time. But she wanted to play. She had something inside her that needed to come out, a feeling that no one could understand without hearing it. She had music in her blood, in her soul, and it could not stay silent. As she entered, the hall felt different this time. There was a hush, a quiet anticipation. The students looked at her with respect now, but there was also doubt lingering in some eyes. They still couldn't believe someone so young, so humble, could play like that. The receptionist, who had laughed at her the day before, didn't even say a word. She just watched, curious, as the girl approached the piano. This time she didn't hesitate. She opened the piano cover, her fingers hovering above the keys. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting her mind clear of distractions. She could feel the sunlight on her face and hear the faint creak of the wooden floors under her feet. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were soft, almost delicate, like a whisper. But they carried an emotion so powerful that the students froze. Every sound seemed to tell a story, as if the piano itself were alive, singing memories that no one could see. She didn't just play the notes, she spoke through them, letting her feelings pour out. There was sorrow, joy, longing, and hope all woven together, each note carefully chosen and felt deeply. The students watched in awe. Some were leaning forward, unable to move, their hands gripping the benches. The instructor, who had been observing from the back, suddenly felt a strange familiarity in the music. His eyes widened. The style, the phrasing, the emotion, it reminded him of someone he had known long ago, someone legendary in the music world. He couldn't believe it. He had heard thousands of students play, but nothing had ever touched him like this. The music grew stronger, more confident, and yet it never lost its gentle, emotional power. The girl's hands moved with a skill and control that seemed impossible. She played with both precision and soul, making the piano sing in ways the students had never imagined. The notes filled the hall, echoing off the polished walls, wrapping around everyone like a warm blanket. Even the harshest critics in the room could not deny the beauty of what they were hearing. As she continued, the atmosphere in the hall changed. The laughter and mockery from the previous day had completely vanished. In their place was silence, thick with awe and surprise. Some students were leaning back, overwhelmed. Others were holding their heads in disbelief. It wasn't just that she played well. It was the way she played, the depth of feeling that seemed beyond her years. Every note, every pause, every soft trill carried meaning. The old instructor stepped closer, his hands trembling slightly. He whispered to himself, almost inaudibly, "It can't be. It's the style. The phrasing. It's her." His voice trailed off as he remembered the legendary pianist who had vanished years ago. The thought sent shivers down his spine. Could it really be possible that this young girl, poor and humble, was connected to that extraordinary talent? Meanwhile, the students who had mocked her were beginning to feel ashamed. The same people who had laughed, whispered, and pointed now sat silently, unable to hide their amazement. They had expected a joke, a moment of entertainment, but instead they were witnessing something extraordinary. They had underestimated her, and now they had to face the truth. The girl, however, did not play for recognition or praise. She played because the music was a part of her heart and soul. She played because it told her story, a story of longing, struggle, and quiet determination. She did not stop until she had said everything she needed to say through the keys. When the final note rang out, it lingered in the air like a soft sigh. The room was still for a moment, no one moving, no one speaking. And then, slowly, someone began to clap. A single hand, soft but steady. Then another joined in, and another, until the applause filled the hall, warm and heartfelt. Some students even stood, clapping with genuine admiration. The girl opened her eyes, a small smile forming on her lips. She didn't look at the applause with arrogance, only a quiet satisfaction that she had shared her music. The instructor finally stepped forward, his face serious but tinged with emotion. "Who taught you?" he asked. His voice was steady, but there was an urgency behind it. He needed to know, because what he had just heard was impossible for an ordinary student to achieve. The girl told him about her mother, about the small piano at home, about practicing in secret for years. She spoke simply, without exaggeration, without trying to impress. She only spoke the truth, that music had been a part of her life since she could remember, and that it was her way of expressing everything she felt but could not say in words. The instructor listened intently, his mind racing. He had not heard such phrasing and depth of feeling in decades. He recognized something in her playing that went beyond technique. It was instinct, heritage, and passion all combined. He realized slowly that she was not just talented. She carried the same gift that had once belonged to the legendary pianist who had disappeared from the world. Word of her performance spread quickly. By the next day, everyone in the town knew about the girl and the miracle she had performed on the piano. Even families from far away began to take notice, curious about the mysterious girl who could play with such power and emotion. People began to talk about her not as a poor, quiet girl, but as someone extraordinary, someone who had the potential to change everything around her. For the girl, it was both thrilling and overwhelming. She had only wanted to play the piano, to share her love of music. She had never imagined that her small act of courage would lead to this, that it would make people listen, make people notice, make people respect her. She began to feel that perhaps this was only the beginning, that her life, which had seemed so limited and ordinary, might have something bigger waiting for her, but there were still challenges ahead. Not everyone would welcome her talent with open arms. There would be skeptics, people who doubted her, people who wanted to see her fail. She knew this deep down, yet she felt ready. The music had given her strength, and now she felt that nothing could hold her back, and so the girl continued to practice in secret, even as the attention grew. Every day she returned to the piano, refining her skill, pouring her heart into every note, every chord, every melody. She didn't play for fame or recognition, she played because it was part of who she was. And little did she know, her talent, her music, and her courage were about to reveal a truth that would shock everyone who had ever doubted her. This was the moment when a simple request to play a piano had become something extraordinary. The girl, who had been mocked and overlooked, had shown the world that talent cannot be hidden forever, and that sometimes a quiet heart can carry the loudest music. She had begun a journey that would uncover secrets, reveal her heritage, and change the lives of everyone around her forever. The girl had never expected her life to change so quickly. Just a few days ago, she had been invisible, just another face in the small town going about her chores and hiding her dreams. But now, people were noticing her. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Children in the streets stopped to stare as she passed. Adults exchanged curious glances, and even strangers in the marketplace recognized her. Some people came to the music hall just to see her play. But for the girl, all of this attention was both thrilling and confusing. She still felt ordinary, still felt like the same quiet girl she had always been. Even though the world seemed to treat her differently after her second performance, she was approached by the old music instructor. His eyes were wide with a mixture of astonishment and concern. "I need to know everything," he said softly, almost urgently. "Tell me about your mother, every detail you can remember." The girl hesitated for a moment. Her mother had passed away when she was very young. She had only fragments of memory, a gentle smile, a soft voice singing melodies as she slept, and the careful way her mother had taught her to play the piano. But she had never known her mother's full story. She had never understood her mother's past, her talent, or why she had chosen to raise her in this quiet town instead of staying with family who had money, influence, and a name in the world of music. I only remember small things," the girl said, her voice trembling slightly. "She taught me at home. She had a small piano, old and a little broken, but it was hers. She said music was life, and she said I had to feel it, not just play it. That's all I know." The instructor nodded slowly, but his expression told a different story. He seemed to recognize something in her words, something that made him tense with surprise and maybe a little fear. "Your mother's name," he asked carefully. "What was her full name?" The girl said it without hesitation, just the name she had heard her father say once, years ago, in a whisper when speaking of her mother. "Her name was Ilara," she said. The instructor froze for a moment. The name was almost impossible to hear without reacting. It belonged to someone legendary, someone whose music had touched millions and whose disappearance had shocked the entire musical world years ago. He looked at the girl with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Could it be possible that she was Ilara's daughter? The resemblance in talent was uncanny, but that was impossible, or was it? He decided to test her in a way he had not done with any other student. Play something more complicated, he said gently. Something you think shows who you are. Something that comes from your heart. The girl nodded. She had learned many pieces from memory, some simple, some more advanced. She sat at the grand piano, her fingers hovering above the keys for a moment as she took a deep breath. And then she began to play. The music started softly, like the wind brushing over quiet fields. But soon it became more intricate, more emotional, and more precise. Her fingers moved with a grace and speed that seemed impossible, but each note carried meaning. Each chord seemed to tell a story. The instructor watched, holding his breath, recognizing the style immediately. Every movement, every touch of the keys reminded him of the famous performances of Ilara. The same rhythm, the same phrasing, the same emotional depth. It was unmistakable. As she played, the instructor felt tears forming in his eyes. He had never expected to see such talent again, and yet here it was, alive and breathing in front of him. The girl didn't notice him staring. She was completely lost in the music, as if playing connected her to her mother, to the past, to something bigger than herself. When the final note faded, silence fell over the room. The students and staff present were speechless. They had seen great performers, but nothing like this. They had never witnessed music that carried such depth and emotion, especially from someone so young. Someone who had seemed so ordinary. The instructor approached her carefully, not wanting to overwhelm her. I think you need to know the truth, he said softly. Your mother, she was not just a great pianist. She was one of the most talented musicians of her time. People around the world admired her. She was extraordinary. And now it seems some of that extraordinary talent lives in you. The girl blinked, unable to process everything at once. You mean I'm like her? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, the instructor said, his eyes gentle but serious. It seems that way. Your style, your expression, your understanding of music, it's the same. It's as if your mother's soul is alive in your playing. The girl's heart raced. She had always loved music, had always dreamed of performing, but she had never imagined that she carried something so rare inside her. All her life, she had thought of herself as ordinary, invisible, unimportant. And now she realized that she was the daughter of someone extraordinary, someone whose music had once moved millions. As she tried to absorb this, the instructor continued. I know you don't know much about her. Very few people do. But her disappearance was not simple. She left to protect something. Something she didn't want the world to control. And now you have her gift. It is yours to explore, to nurture, and to share. But it will also bring challenges. The girl felt a mix of excitement and fear. Challenges? She had faced hardship all her life, poverty, mockery, loneliness, but this seemed different. This was bigger. This was a responsibility, something that required more than just talent. She wasn't just playing music for herself anymore. She was carrying a legacy, a story, a connection to someone the world had never fully understood. Over the next few days, the instructor guided her. He watched her play, corrected small technical details, and shared stories about her mother. He told her about Ilara's performances, her life, the people she had touched, and the sacrifices she had made. The girl listened, absorbing every word, feeling both pride and sadness. She realized that her mother had been more than just a musician. She had been a brave woman who had made difficult choices to protect the ones she loved. Word of her talent continued to spread. People came from neighboring towns to hear her play. Some came out of curiosity, some out of respect, and some out of disbelief. Every performance brought new recognition, new whispers, and new opportunities. But with recognition came questions. People wanted to know who she was, where she came from, and how she had learned to play so beautifully. The girl answered simply, telling them about her mother and the lessons she had learned at home. She didn't boast. She didn't try to impress. She only spoke the truth because she knew that honesty and heart mattered more than reputation or fame. And slowly, people began to understand. They saw not just talent, but dedication, humility, and courage. They saw a girl who had faced hardship, who had been mocked and overlooked, and who had still pursued her dreams with everything she had. One afternoon, as she was leaving the music hall after another performance, a man approached her. He was older, dignified, and carried an air of authority. "I believe you are connected to our family," he said carefully. "Your mother—" "She was my sister." The girl froze. She had never known about her extended family. She had heard vague mentions, whispers in her childhood, but no one had ever explained. And now this man was telling her that her mother had been part of a powerful and respected musical family. "You are my niece," he said. "You carry her talent, and now, perhaps, it is time to understand who you are and where you come from." The girl felt a swirl of emotions: shock, confusion, pride, and fear. She had always been alone, always independent, always self-reliant. And now she was being told that she belonged to something bigger, something she had never known. She didn't know how to react. She didn't know what this meant for her life, but deep inside she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this was the connection she had been missing. Perhaps this was the truth that could guide her, help her understand her mother, and help her embrace the talent that had been part of her all along. That evening, she sat by her small piano at home, practicing quietly. The room was still, except for the soft sounds of the keys. But this time, something felt different. She was no longer just a girl playing for herself. She was playing for her mother, for her family, and for the music that had always been a part of her life. She was beginning to understand that her talent was more than skill. It was a gift, a legacy, and a story waiting to be told. And in that quiet moment, she realized something important. No matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter how complicated her life would become, she had the power to shape her own path. Her music would guide her, and her heart would lead her. She was no longer invisible. She was beginning to find herself, and her story was only just beginning. The days following the revelation about her mother were some of the most confusing and exciting of the girl's life. She had discovered that she was not just a talented musician, but that her talent came from a mother who had been legendary, a woman whose name had once filled concert halls with awe. And now there were family members who wanted to see her, to meet her, to understand if she really was connected to that extraordinary legacy. It all began one afternoon when the same dignified man, who had revealed he was her uncle, returned with a few others. They were all formally dressed, carrying themselves with an air of authority and pride. But there was warmth in their eyes too, a curiosity and hope that the girl could feel immediately. They looked at her carefully, as if they were trying to measure not just her talent, but her spirit, her heart. "Your mother was our sister," the elder man said again, his voice calm but firm. "She was a musician beyond compare. And if what we have heard about you is true, then some of her gift lives in you." The girl's heart beat faster. She had always imagined meeting family she didn't know existed, but she had never expected it to happen so soon, so suddenly, or so formally. And she had never imagined the weight of expectation that came with it. These were people who had known her mother, who had celebrated her music, who had seen her rise and disappear from the world. They were looking at the girl now, silently asking her to prove herself. Her uncle led her to the music hall once again. This time, it was not just the instructor and a few students who would watch. This time, it was her family, people who had grown up with her mother's talent, people who had lived in the world her mother had left behind. They wanted to see if she could play, to see if she truly carried the same gift. The girl felt a mix of excitement and fear. She had practiced all her life, yes, but this was different. This was no longer about proving herself to strangers or earning respect from those who had mocked her. This was about family, about heritage, about the very blood that ran through her veins. She took a deep breath, sat at the grand piano, and let her fingers hover above the keys. Then she began to play. From the first note, the hall was transformed. The music was not just beautiful, it was alive. It carried emotion that seemed far beyond her years, telling stories of longing, joy, loss, and hope. Each note seemed to flow effortlessly, yet it was precise, controlled, and full of life. The family members watched in silence, some leaning forward, some with tears forming in their eyes. They had heard her mother perform countless times, but never had they imagined seeing her child play with the same depth, the same soul. The girl closed her eyes and allowed the music to move through her. She remembered the lessons from her mother, the hours spent at home on the old piano, the moments when she had felt invisible and alone. But now, her music was not just a personal expression, it was a bridge to her family, a connection to her heritage. Each note she played was like a message to her mother, a way of saying, "I remember, I carry your gift, and I will honor it." Her uncle, standing quietly at the back, felt a rush of emotion he could not control. He remembered the sound of his sister's hands on the keys, the power of her performances, the warmth she had brought to every stage. And now he saw the same warmth, the same intensity, reflected in the girl before him. He realized that she was not just a child of extraordinary talent, she was a continuation of everything their family had valued, everything their mother had fought for. After several minutes, the piece came to a soft, lingering end. Silence fell over the room for a long moment, broken only by the sound of the girl's breathing. Then slowly, one of the family members began to clap. The sound was tentative at first, then stronger, until everyone in the room joined in. Some were wiping away tears, some were smiling with awe, and some simply stood, stunned by what they had witnessed. The girl opened her eyes and saw the faces around her. She saw pride, love, curiosity, and amazement. She realized in that moment that she was not alone. She had family who cared about her, family who understood her, and family who wanted to support her talent. But there was also a sense of responsibility that settled over her. This gift, this talent, was not just hers, it was part of a legacy, a story that had begun before she was born. And now it was her responsibility to honor it. Her uncle stepped forward, his voice steady but full of emotion. "It is clear now," he said, "that your mother's gift lives in you. But talent alone is not enough. You must continue to grow, to learn, and to carry this gift with humility and strength. You have the power to inspire, to move people with your music just as your mother did." The girl nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and determination. She had spent her life working hard, learning in secret, and proving herself to the world in small ways. Now she realized that her journey was far from over. This was only the beginning of a larger path, one that would require courage, dedication, and heart. Over the following days, her family began to guide her more closely. They shared stories of her mother's performances, her techniques, her struggles, and her triumphs. They introduced her to new pieces, more challenging and complex than anything she had played before. They taught her to refine her skills, to deepen her emotional expression, and to embrace the responsibility that came with her gift. The girl was eager to learn. Every lesson was a discovery, every piece of music a challenge. She practiced tirelessly, feeling her confidence grow with each note. But she also felt the weight of expectation. She knew that people were watching, waiting to see if she could truly live up to her mother's legacy. Some of the students from the music hall, who had once mocked her, now looked at her with awe and respect, but there was also jealousy and doubt in some eyes. She ignored the whispers and focused on her music, understanding that her journey was hers alone. As weeks passed, the bond between the girl and her family strengthened. She learned more about her mother's life, the choices she had made, and the sacrifices that had led to her disappearance. She understood why her mother had chosen to raise her quietly, away from the pressures of fame and expectation. And she began to see herself not just as a child carrying talent, but as a bridge between the past and the future, someone who could honor her mother's memory while creating her own path. One afternoon, after a long practice session, her uncle spoke to her gently. "Your mother always believed that music could change lives," he said. "And now it is your turn to share that gift. Not for fame, not for wealth, but for the hearts of people who need to hear it. You have the power to inspire. Never forget that." The girl nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. She realized that all the mockery, the hardships, and the loneliness she had faced were not wasted. They had shaped her, strengthened her, and prepared her for this moment. Her talent was not just inherited, it was earned, nurtured, and tested through her perseverance. As she sat at the piano that evening, playing softly in the quiet of the music hall, she felt a sense of peace. She was no longer alone. She had family who believed in her, guidance to help her grow, and a legacy to honor. And most importantly, she had herself, her courage, her heart, and her music. The realization hit her slowly but clearly. She had come a long way from the girl who had been mocked for a simple request to play a piano. She had faced doubt, fear, and ridicule, yet she had persevered. And now she was ready to embrace her destiny, to take the gift that had been passed down through her bloodline, and to share it with the world in her own way. The family's recognition and support had given her more than just validation, they had given her purpose. And as the girl played into the evening, her fingers dancing over the keys with grace and power, she felt a deep connection not only to her mother, but to herself. She understood that talent was only part of the story. Dedication, heart, and courage were what truly made a musician extraordinary. The girl's journey was far from over. Challenges would come, skeptics would question her, and the world would not always be kind. But she now had the foundation, the support, and the knowledge to face whatever lay ahead. She had proven to herself and to others that she was not just the daughter of a legendary pianist, she was a musician in her own right, ready to make her mark on the world. And as she finished her final piece that evening, the room was silent once more, but this time it was a silence filled with respect, admiration, and the quiet anticipation of a bright future. The girl had discovered her bloodline, embraced her legacy, and found the courage to step fully into her own extraordinary story.